Infographics, bro, this is why people don't like the channel. You can't make this mistake, bro. You cannot make this mistake. This video brings up a really good point that no countries have money for the ensuing World War III that's about to happen.
It's the most expensive arms race in history, but the real cost could be far greater. In 2024, nations poured a staggering $2.7 trillion into their militaries, a record high even as they drowned in pandemic debt, battled runaway inflation, and watched their infrastructure crumble.
I mean, a lot of this does come down to the pandemic and all the crazy things we had to do to be able to survive that whole, basically, plague. So a lot of people around the world do not have money. We're all facing horrific inflation. I don't see, and at the very same time, you were expecting to see multiple conflicts. I mean, there already is conflicts happening around the world. We might see even more pop up.
Today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're looking at why every country is preparing for a war that none of them can actually afford to fight for decades.
Very interesting. What a very interesting concept. Now, I would like to point out World War II, we couldn't necessarily afford that, but we found a way. And the scary part is that sometimes war is extremely profitable. That's a tough one. Sometimes that also sometimes you gotta just kind of burn the whole system down to the ground, the whole economic system, and war is a great way to do that, not to freak people out, but that's got to be on some people's minds.
It's the General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems Factory in Scranton ran just 1 or 2 shifts. The 155mm artillery line turned out 10 to 14,000 shells a month, plenty to keep U.S. stockpiles full and allied nations supplied. Not anymore. Now the factory floor blazes with activity. Welders shower sparks across steel casings, while massive hydraulic presses stamp shell bodies out of 2,000-pound bars of steel.
This reminds me that I can't remember what resource, what military material this was. Something about shells. Maybe it's anti-aircraft shells or something like that. Well, we were producing more back in World War II per day than we're able to produce a year to support Ukraine. Back in World War II, we were producing so much more material in general. Now, that shouldn't be that surprising. I'm sure we were able to make way more aircraft carriers, maybe, back in World War II. I'm not sure about that stat. But, I'm just thinking different military equipment, helmets, boots. We were probably producing a lot more because the entire economy of the U.S. had been turned into a war economy. Right now, we're obviously not in a war economy. One of the only countries that are in a war economy, though, is Russia.
With mechanical precision. The air thrums with the sound of artillery rounds rolling off the assembly line every 4 minutes. The factory is running at wartime pace. 3 shifts, 7 days a week, pushing out almost 40,000 shells monthly.
Oh, here you go.
The numbers tell the real story. Ukraine consumes more 155mm ammunition in 2 weeks than the U.S. produced in an entire year before 2022.
There's the stat. Okay, yes.
The factory shells immediately replenish dwindling American stockpiles, drained by aid shipments to Kyiv. But it is a losing race. Every shell that rolls off the production line represents a small fortune to the average American family. But it's all part of the desperate and dizzying arithmetic of modern war. The scale of global
And this is just the U.S. trying to support Ukraine, also the U.S. supporting Israel. But I think when it comes to Israel, a lot of it is just pure cash. We're just handing them money. I know that we give them military equipment as well too, but Ukraine, it's military equipment more.
Military spending has finally reached levels that would make Cold War planners sweat. The United States alone spent $886 billion on defense in 2024. A figure so massive it exceeds the GDP of most nations. But breaking down that astronomical number reveals the true scope of America's military commitment.
I mean, that's the scary thing. Inflation is just out of freaking control for the entire world. So we're seeing numbers, like you just mentioned. At some point very soon here, the American military budget is going to be over $1 trillion. That's very crazy. It's very likely that we will eventually pass that number for just defense. That doesn't even include anything else. Now, don't get me wrong. I will have a rant about why I do think defense is important. I think America should have a pretty high defense. Maybe it doesn't need to be that high, though, right? Maybe it doesn't need to be over $1 trillion. Maybe it doesn't need to be, what did you just say, $866 billion? What if it was just $800 billion? That's pretty good, right? What if we took that 66 million or billion and I don't know, improved the lives of Americans? Crazy thoughts.
Pentagon's base budget alone gobbles up hundreds of billions, but emergency supplementals tell the real story. Congress approved a staggering $30.6 billion emergency request for ammunition stockpiles, more money than most countries spend on their entire military. Another $113 billion went to foreign aid, much of it replacing American weapons shipped overseas. The result? America is funding 3 major fronts.
I like how, he says the money's being sent overseas, but the B-roll says Israel. Yeah.
Ukraine's fight against Russia, an escalating Middle Eastern war, and a military technology race with China. For the first time in American history.
The escalating military technology race, yes. Well, to be fair, that technology is going to be useful in Ukraine and in Israel. Again, I want to just say that defense is still important. I've been meaning to make this rant on my Drew IRL channel for a while. I get that it sounds amazing if we could just all have a zero defense budget, if all the countries around the world could just literally not spend any money on defense. But that's just not how it works. We do not live in a perfect society. We do not live in a peaceful society. There's always going to be warmongers. We're always going to have something to protect ourselves, because we can just tomorrow wake up and be like, you know what? Screw the military. Let's spend zero. How do you think that's going to work out for us? You think China's just going to be like, oh, I guess since they're not spending anything, we won't spend anything either. I hope people watching this are not that gullible, but I get very scared and surprised by some of the comments that I see.
Interest payments on the national debt, $640 billion annually, now virtually exceed defense spending. The Treasury Department's own analyst disclosed time in American history. Interest payments on the national debt, $640 billion annually, now virtually exceed defense spending.
Bro, we've been yelling about this for so long. It's crazy. And we're still not going to do nothing about it. And none of the parties are going to do nothing about it. That was probably the closest moment, maybe like 6 months ago. When was that? 3 months ago? I can't remember now. Time is just an abstraction. But I thought for a second there we were going to tackle the national debt, and we didn't. And it's just guaranteed now that we just don't even care. Jesus. The idea that I hear is that inflation is just going to continue to rise, and that's what we want, and we're going to artificially inflate the crap out of everything. That way, we actually put a little bit of a dent in our debt, and that way, this $640 billion is this interest or whatever the debt is at, it's easier to attack, because if you just inflate currency, then it's going to be easier to generate that money, maybe pay it back. Bro, no one's paying that shit back. It's so crazy.
The Treasury Department's own analysts describe this as entering uncharted fiscal territory, where borrowing costs compete directly with military readiness for federal dollars. China's response has been equally dramatic, though shrouded in characteristic opacity. Beijing's official military budget for 2025 is $296 billion.
They're getting up there. They're certainly getting up there, but it's still nowhere close to the U.S. yet.
Representing a 7.2% annual increase that has sustained for over a decade. But Western intelligence estimates suggest a real figure approaches $450 billion when accounting for dual-use technologies, military civil fusion programs, and off-budget nuclear modernization. Beijing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they are not giving the most accurate numbers there. Or, like they said, there's like hybrid industries that would increase that budget size. However, is our own military defense incentivized to say, hey, China reports this number, but it's actually a much bigger number, so give us more money too. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure that could be an aspect of what's going on.
Beijing now possesses the world's largest navy by hull count and has doubled its nuclear warhead stockpile since 2020. And it fields hypersonic weapons that U.S. defenses cannot intercept. Each Chinese military advance triggers billion-dollar American countermeasures, creating an action-reaction cycle that certain pundits have called the world's most expensive chess match.
I mean, that's exactly how things happened. That's exactly how it went down for 50 years during the Cold War. The Soviets build a new fighter or bomber jet, and then the Americans have to quickly rush to make their own that's better, and then it's just like a constant. That's why they call it a Cold War. Different technologies are developed, and one side unveils what they got, and the other side scrambles to get something better, and just constantly back and forth and back and forth. And that's kind of what's happening here, except this is not a Cold War yet, I would say officially, because it's just a weird situation because the U.S. and China are like still pretty heavily economically tied. It's not like the Cold War days where there was just completely two different worlds that were functioning independently. We're all interconnected. Now, as time goes on, though, as we move away from globalization, I don't think we'll see as divided of a world as we saw in the Cold War, but it's going to be a very weird gray area, how much China needs the U.S. and vice versa.
Europe's rearmament tells an even more dramatic story. Germany, which spent decades treating military modernization as an optional expense, eventually committed to doubling defense spending within 5 years to surpass NATO's 2% GDP target.
I've already mentioned that in the case of Europe, this is great. Please, Europe, please, you got to spend more on defense. You got for your own sake. I'm literally just asking you for your own sake, because they have already said it. You can't trust America because you don't know what America's going to do Tuesday. You don't know what America's going to eat. You think they're going to eat one thing, and then the next day they come out with a salad. Like, what the hell, America? You never eat salads. Europe has got to increase their defense budget. It's scary because I know they don't have it. Or I know that they're going to have to really. It's going to have time to, what they call that, tighten the belt. You're going to have to make the belt a little bit tighter. You're going to get hungry. There's going to be certain aspects of their industries that are going to have to get cut but you got to do it. You got to build the military up in Europe just for your own safety at this point.
Upping the target to 3.5.
I think that's happening because they're now questioning if the U.S. would actually honor the NATO agreement. I think a lot of people in Europe just don't trust that America will actually come and defend NATO. So that's all you need to hear. With just that small doubt, you got to increase defense budget. You got to jack that shit up.
5%. After Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the then Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced a 100 billion euro special fund for military modernization, the largest defense investment in German history, while warning the parliament that we are living through a turning point in history. Today, Germany has surged to become the world's fourth largest military spender. Its defense budget is now the highest in Central and Western Europe since the 1990 reunification.
Oh man, I thought you were going to say something else. I didn't know since when. When did Germany also have this amount of spending? The last time Germany was in first, it was the 1930s, I think. I'm pretty sure they were first for a brief moment there. And look what happened then.
The collapse of the Soviet Union. All of Europe is following suit, some like Poland leading the charge. Spooked by Russian aggression, the Poles almost immediately increased military spending to 4% of GDP, ordering almost
As they should. Americans do not fully understand what happened to Europe, to the European countries, Poland for a big one, but all the Baltic countries, Finland. I don't think the Americans fully grasp how massive of a thing this, like, Europe is very threatened by Russia. They're going to get their revenge on Russia no matter what it takes. They are in it. And America does not fully see, I think, that the scale of Europe's readiness to fight Russia.
1,400 K2
and the threat that Russia poses, obviously. But
Black Panther tanks from South Korea and 250 M1A2 Abrams from the United States. The total package amounts to $6 billion for a nation with a GDP smaller than Florida's.
Damn.
What is going on? Even traditionally neutral nations have abandoned decades of military restraint.
So Sweden joined NATO just recently after Finland joined NATO. Sweden was neutral famously for a very, very long time there.
Sweden, which maintained neutrality through 2 world wars, not only joined NATO, but increased defense spending by 40% in just 2 years. Finland followed suit, ending its careful balancing act between East and West to become NATO's 31st member.
Yeah, they literally called it the Finlandization. And I don't even blame them. Bro, Russia, this is the third big moment where Russia, after the fall of the Soviet Union, attacked a neighbor. Everybody that neighbors Russia should be joining NATO at this point. Obviously, Ukraine, it's complicated there because they're in the middle of a war. Belarus should join NATO. We're not going to let them. Belarus likes Russia. But if I was Belarus and I cared about my sovereignty, damn, I don't know.
Nothing illustrates Europe's security transformation like Sweden's quiet quest to prepare for war. In 2018, the Swedish government mailed a 32-page pamphlet titled "If Crisis or War Comes" to all 4.8 million households.
Damn.
The booklet, updated for the first time since the Cold War, provides
Come and help me put our IKEA bomb shelters together.
instructions on
Yeah, they do IKEA bomb shelters in Sweden, and in Denmark they are known as Lego bomb shelters.
stockpiling food, finding shelter during air raids, and identifying disinformation campaigns. Most Swedes probably thought this kind of preparation was history. But neutrality isn't neutral when your neighbor threatens nuclear war. You choose a side. Sweden's military transformation has been swift and costly. Defense spending jumped from $6.2 billion in 2021 to $8.75 billion in 2024, with plans to reach $29 billion by 2035. The government reintroduced military conscription, expanded civil defense programs, and began construction of new underground command bunkers. Most symbolically, Sweden abandoned its policy of arms export restrictions.
One of the last times Sweden was at war was with Russia. Now, mind you, it was like 300 years ago during the Great Northern War. But yeah, a lot of these European countries, they don't have to look that far back to when they were last at war with Russia. Whether it's France and the Napoleonic eras, and obviously that didn't work out for them. But then France and the UK helped the Ottomans during the Crimean War against Russia. Finland's got the Winter War. Sweden, I mentioned the Great Northern War. Poland had to fight Russia for their independence in the 1920s.
Shipping AT-4 anti-tank weapons directly to Ukraine. Switzerland's
Obviously, Germany's fought in Russia. We all know about that one.
response has been more subtle but equally significant. The Alpine nation, famous for armed neutrality and secret banking, quietly authorized $6.5 billion for F-35 fighter jets, despite fierce domestic opposition. Swiss military planners have
I mean, the Swiss are... I think the Swiss are a different level of neutrality than even Sweden is, but sometimes, I mean, I know the Swiss are very far away from Russia, but damn, maybe it's time they finally, that would break the internet, but maybe it's time for them to finally choose a side. Is anyone else feeling that? Maybe it's time to finally join NATO or something here in Switzerland. I don't know, but everyone's doing it. All your bros, that would break the internet, though, the day Switzerland joins NATO or does anything. That would be absolutely insane.
begun modernizing the country's extensive network of alpine fortifications, bunkers and tunnels built during World War II that can shelter 114% of the population.
Oh yeah, the Swiss would be great for defense. I don't know how much the Swiss are going to be able to do outside of Switzerland, but they're definitely certainly a very rich country.
Telling is what's happening in Switzerland's financial sector. Major banks have established economic warfare task forces to prepare for potential exclusion from international payment systems. Credit Suisse's collapse in 2023 taught Swiss authorities that financial neutrality offers no protection in an interconnected world where sanctions can cripple entire economies overnight. Meanwhile,
We don't even know what's going to happen. We might currently, as I'm speaking in this video, we could currently be in a recession. We don't know it. The way the recession works is it's 2 negative growth quarters. So the U.S. could be in a recession. That's a big theory. It feels like I would put more of a bet on that now than I would a year ago. Something definitely feels wrong economically, but now it's actually affecting the jobs. I was going to make another video about that, but yeah, the Fed made sure with the higher rates, like this was all a part of the Fed's plan. The central bank of the U.S. is to destroy jobs. That's why they kept rates so high. I feel like people that are complaining about that don't understand what was going on. For 2 years now, we've been trying to curb inflation. So so this was always a part of the plan, that job creation and new job openings and people were going to be put out of work. That was their plan. That's kind of a dark way to look at it, but we needed people to get fired. We needed the unemployment rate to go up. Now that we're now back to cutting rates again, job creation might possibly get better, but inflation's going to spike up again. And now the thing that everyone worried about for the last 4 years now or 3 years now is stagflation. And that word is being thrown around a lot. It looks closer and closer, like we are seeing stagflation now, which is, a stagnant economy, and we're in with inflation at the very same time. That's pretty much the worst thing you could ask for right now in our situation. I mean, a Great Recession or a Great Depression, I guess, would be worse. But
2024, Japan poured $50.2 billion into defense, its largest military budget since World War II, and an 11% jump from the year before. But the nation is drowning in debt, with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 260%.
Speaking of countries that have dealt with stagflation and just a stagnant economy, Japan has been dealing with a stagnant economy for a very long time. I worry about Japan. Japan is struggling. Japan is losing people. They don't have any babies over there. They were trying to import like a bunch of Indian immigrants, and the Japanese people were like, hell no, hell no. People forget that Japan is like very anti-immigrant, and that's not a new thing. They've literally, they closed their country off for like 50 years there. It's actually like 30. But the Portuguese came over, the Dutch came over. They said, everyone get out except for you. You Dutch guy, you can stay. And the Dutch were the only ones allowed to trade with Japan for like 300 years there or something. The Americans had to send our gunboats over there. And to quote one of my favorite history creators, he's kind of a history creator, Bill Wirtz, he said, knock, knock, open the country, stop having it be closed. That's what the Americans said to Japan. And that was the only time they were like, all right, fine. So people are surprised that Japan doesn't want immigrants. Bro, do you know nothing about Japan's history? They have never wanted people that are not from Japan in Japan. Like, damn.
Defense buildup against China is projected to drive spending up 65% over the next 5 years. Nearly a third of Japan's population is now over 65, and the debt service alone will swallow 40% of government revenue by 2030.
See, that's the thing, though. What is Japan going to do? I mean, you kind of need some immigration to do the jobs and to keep retirement up and to, keep work going on as more and more of the population begins to retire. I don't see how you're going to fix it because technology isn't there yet. We don't have the robotics and the AI to be able to just magically, maybe in 5 years, but who knows?
This is today's debt trap reality. It's impossible for anyone in these types of situations to overlook the confounding influence of the COVID-19 pandemic. The global event not only killed millions, it financially crippled nations that are now racing to rearm. Global government debt spiked during the pandemic, creating the worst fiscal crisis since World War II.
Do I want to say this? I don't know. I don't know if I want to say this, but it feels like we probably shouldn't have sacrificed the economy. Is anyone else feeling that? Can we say that now? Because I know that was very controversial 5 years ago, but I thought it at the time. I'm like, is this a good idea? Because we might completely be screwing the economy up for my lifetime because we're going to prioritize COVID over the economy. And the economy affects 100% of people on the globe. Like, everyone will be affected. The entire world will be affected if we're all in a Great Depression era. I mean, people were saying at the time, that's all I'm saying. We were warned about it at the time. And the economy is probably not going to get fixed. I mean, basically every economic problem that we have seen as of after 2020 has been because of the pandemic. And it's not going to go away. Basically, everything that happens now after for the rest of the 2020s is going to be because of our actions we took during 2020 and 2021.
Countries that spent trillions keeping their economies alive are now spending additional trillions preparing to stave off existential threats abroad. The United States, despite its economic strength, runs a budget deficit of 6.2%, levels the Congressional Budget Office describes as unsustainable. The federal debt reached $33.7 trillion in 2023, growing by $1 trillion every 100 days. Yet defense spending continues climbing, driven by China's military expansion and indefinite security commitments to partners across the globe.
I think it's important to remember that just because China is building up their military does not necessarily mean that it is built to kill the U.S. I think every American, when they see this, they think, oh, China wants war with the U.S., China wants war with the U.S. Not necessarily. It's not necessarily. China borders 14 different countries, something like that. Vietnam, Laos, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan. Am I going to go through the whole list right now? But yeah, I mean, they border a lot of different countries. You have to keep all that in mind. It's not like they're in the same situation as the U.S. where they have an entire continent to themselves. No, in fact, the opposite. They do not have an entire continent to themselves. They live on the biggest continent, and oh yeah, mind you, they border India, the number one most populated country on Earth, and then Russia, a very big superpower. Like, you know, even though China and Russia, they try to be friends, like you still need some sort of defense to counteract those two. But I think it's just something to keep in mind.
Or even worse in Europe. The continent's economy contracted by 6.1% during COVID-19, the worst recession since the 1930s. Energy costs exploded after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with natural gas prices spiking by 400% and forcing governments to subsidize heating bills. Now these same cash-strapped nations must fund massive military modernization programs, partly out of peer pressure and partly due to a genuine fear of resurgent authoritarian revisionism. With a debt-to-GDP ratio,
Europe's in trouble. I mean, I've been saying that. Europe is in big trouble. I don't know what Europe's going to do. I mean, do they even have somebody in the AI race? Like, I know that's like what all the economists talk about here, but I don't, like, do they have a major company? Do they have a major, I don't know. It's scary. As someone that's trying my best to get myself to invest more in international stocks, like anything to diversify away from the U.S., it's just scary, because it's like, Europe, come on, man, you gotta. I don't know. You gotta do something. I need you to do something. Like, please, can we get some more innovation? I mean, that's the criticism that most American economists say, is that U.S. and I don't know. I'm not an economist, but they say that Europe stifles innovation. There's too much regulation, and that's why they don't have any big growing businesses, essentially. But I don't know.
Of 144%, among the highest in the developed world, Italy should be cutting spending. Instead, it increased military expenditures in 2024 in a bid to get up to the 2% minimum threshold stipulated by NATO, committing to new fighter jets, naval vessels, and missile defense systems. Back in 2018, during President Trump's first term, he was already pressuring the Europeans to spend upwards of 4% of GDP on defense. After one fiery
It's just funny because he did he did that in the first term, and yeah, they weren't happy about that, which I understand. It's not easy for them just to switch the economies. However, for Trump 2 now, Trump's second term, very different tone. It's just interesting that he did try to get him to do it before the Russian invasion, and some did, to be fair, but now we're in a very different world. And now I think Europe is trying to increase defense spending.
Meeting with the American president, Italian Defense Minister Elisabetta Trenta burst out laughing at the president's demands. Spending 4% of GDP on the military cannot be done, she told the press then. It isn't even thinkable. It's already incredibly difficult to get to 2%, even though we have agreed to that. In today's jittery security climate, even Italy is scrambling to justify pushing military spending beyond 4% by 2035. One creative solution is building the world's longest suspension bridge between...
Good, you know what? I would say good on Infographics show for highlighting that. That was pretty... I'm glad that was brought up, because I do remember that time. I do remember the push to get all the countries to above 2% before Russia invaded Ukraine.
In Sicily and the mainland, then reclassifying it as a national security expenditure and NATO strategic asset. Suddenly, a $16 billion construction project becomes a loophole, disguised as a landmark. We respect the hustle, but
yeah, the suspension bridge to connect to Sicily finally. We'll see if that finally happens. They've been talking about that for a long time, so I don't really have a whole lot of faith, but we'll see.
Calling a bridge a missile shield? Well, that's a stretch, even for NATO. The United Kingdom is still reeling from Brexit's economic disruption and post-pandemic inflation, and also scrambling to build bridges in the quest for military modernization. But
I don't know what UK is going to do, man. The UK is a whole nother situation. Yeah, I had a video talking about how all the countries that I was worried about their future, which countries I think would disappear, and yeah, on the very, very bottom of the list, but I did include them. I said something about the UK, and that definitely got some people talking, that's for sure. But I do worry about the UK, bro. Like, it's every time I look over there, it just does not look good, the situation over there.
Not in the literal sense. The Brits recently locked themselves into a 50-year AUKUS nuclear submarine deal with Australia worth up to £20 billion.
AUKUS is Australia. Australia, United Kingdom, USA. But also there's Canuckus, Canada, Canuckus. I can't even do it. But anyways, there's a whole bunch of different little acronyms. It's basically the former British Empire and the USA. So Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
For Britain in exports over the next 20.
South Africa and India, we don't talk about it anymore. That's what the British Empire says. We don't talk about South Africa and India. They're the long-lost stepchilds.
5 years. The price is about 5% of Britain's entire annual government spending, financed entirely through borrowing. Meanwhile, Australia is going all in. It's spending 368 billion Australian dollars over 3 decades for nuclear submarines.
So remember, each country here is defending against something else. So Japan and Australia, because we're talking about them too, they're obviously defending against China. China and maybe North Korea. You could probably throw North Korea in there as well. South Korea, North Korea, kind of getting into it. But yeah, you would think. I feel like it's only a matter of time before they essentially create their own. There needs to be like a NATO in the Pacific. There needs to be a Pacific NATO, whether the U.S. is involved in that or not. I believe there's already a defensive pact between the Philippines and Japan. Is that right? I think they have. There's so many different defensive pacts, and you always have to be careful with these contracts because it might be publicly announced, but if poop really hits the fan, they don't always have to be honored. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, it's kind of surprising that we don't see some sort of NATO of the Pacific between Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines. I don't think you're going to be able to pull Taiwan into something like that, but you could try it. Maybe Vietnam would want to join in because they're not big fans of China.
Including billions funneling back to U.S. industry. Former Prime Minister Paul Keating called it the worst deal in all history, warning that it puts all of our defense eggs in one basket. A retired senator and submariner piled on, it won't deliver capability fast enough to deter, let alone fight the war it's supposedly for. The brutal economics of modern warfare make traditional cost-benefit analysis obsolete. Consider Ukraine. Western nations have provided well over $200 billion in military and economic aid since February 2022.
I do think that the war in Ukraine needs to be studied because if you want to see what World War III is going to look like, that is a microcosm of what it could look like. You're going to see a more closer, like with the Israel stuff, what's going on in the Middle East, you can't really say any of the actions that Israel's taken in the Middle East is what would happen in World War III. I mean, maybe on a very even smaller scale. I mean, obviously, we were able to effectively airstrike 3 nuclear facilities without Iran even detecting us. So that's something to take note of for World War III, I guess. But Ukraine and Russia are kind of at the forefront of what another world war in this new century would possibly look like. The drones and things like that.
And that's more than the annual GDP of 140 countries spent in just 3 years of conflict. Modern weapon systems carry price tags that would fund entire government departments. A single U.S. hypersonic missile costs over $14 million. That glitzy B-21 Raider stealth bomber program is projected to cost $203 billion for 100 planes. That is $2 billion per bomber. Enough to buy each one a seat on the Fortune 500. But there is good news, adjusted for...
Isn't the reviewed price closer to $668 million per plane?
Inflation. Aviation Week now says the first 21 Raiders might cost only $668 million apiece. That's right, military...
I mean, what's tough about this is we're spending on something that we might not potentially need. That's what is so controversial. We are spending on these, like if we needed it, and if there was a World War III, then I think generally it's like, okay, we're going to make use of this defense spending. We kind of need this and yada. But what's scary about spending on defense is that a lot of the times we don't even really need it, right? I mean, it might not ever be used. So it's just we're going to spend $200 billion, and the planes are just going to rot in some bunker somewhere. That's what's really terrifying about this situation. I mean, I'm not saying that I want World War III to happen so we could use this stuff. I'm just saying that's a little bit of a concern that we have to spend so much of our economy on defense when it might not even be used.
Budgeting has entered its off-brand Costco era. Buy in bulk, save billions. Meanwhile, the F-35 still runs $80 to $109 million per jet. And that's before you add lifetime maintenance. That price tag currently stands at $1.58 trillion and will only increase. It's proof that stealth doesn't come cheap, especially when it needs software updates more often than your iPhone. A war over in Taiwan could trigger a 10...
Infographics, bro, this is why people don't like the channel. You can't make this mistake, bro. You cannot make this mistake. Why is Vietnam labeled under China? I don't you cannot make this mistake, bro. Like, who, and this is not the first time. This is why my channel, like, says, bro, why are you reviewing infographics? This is why. You gotta know the borders of China if you're gonna be talking about this stuff. All credibility is lost when you do this. Is there a reason why they did this? Let's see.
Software updates more often than your iPhone. A war over in Taiwan could trigger a $10 trillion global economic shock overnight. Half of the world's semiconductor supply, the chips that power every...
No, there wasn't. Bro, you gotta stop doing this. The operation that the Infographics show this channel, I can't even possibly wrap my head around. I don't know how many employees they have. They have to have a lot because they make like 3 videos a day and it's all animated and there's scripts and it's crazy. But this has been going on since like the 2018, 2017. Why does it look like China also has control over South Korea here? Man, jeez.
The chips that power every iPhone, every car computer, every advanced weapon system comes from Taiwan, and nearly all of it is made within 100 miles of the potential invasion zone. Reuters sketched the nightmare in blunt detail. In the mildest scenario, China encircles Taiwan with a naval quarantine, cuts underwater cables, and dares the world to intervene. In the worst-case scenario, it launches the largest amphibious invasion in history while raining missiles on U.S. bases in Japan and Guam.
It seems like all the predictions that I have seen, it will gradually, they're not going to boil the frog instantly. You know, the metaphor of like, you don't put a frog in boiling water, they'll just hop out. Well, if it's boiling, then I don't know if they'll be able to hop out. But yeah, you got to gradually increase. So maybe they'll start by sending some ships out. Maybe they'll start by surrounding the island. Maybe they'll start by being like, oh, we're not doing anything. Maybe they'll start by trying to get the U.S. to get fearful and strike first. Then China could be like, oh, you strike first. It's time to go in.
War games agree. Even if the U.S. Navy sinks ships and holds the line, it bleeds badly doing it. The Brookings Institution warns that China's military gains have made the outcome inherently unknowable. But
imagine this. China takes Taiwan and destroys the vast majority of the U.S. fleet. And now the U.S. doesn't have the fleet to be able to patrol the seas and keep it safe and more. I mean, they could do a 1-2 punch easily. They could take the island that they've always said was theirs and also maybe knock out half of our ships. And then all of a sudden, China has now the biggest fleet in the world. It's time for them to patrol the seas.
One thing is certain, everyone loses, especially Taiwan. Despite these terrifying projections, Western countries continue arming for the type of globally interconnected conflict that could destroy their...
Well, this is why we're trying to get the Taiwan chip factories out of Taiwan. That's why we are building factories, apparently. What is it, like in Arizona or something? We're trying to get as much manufacturing out of the island because we're afraid of this
very way of life. The Pentagon war game concludes the same way it has for 3 years running. America would win the military conflict, but lose the economic peace, spending a decade recovering from a war that lasted 6 months. Putin's 2022 invasion of Ukraine certainly didn't reassure anyone. Instead, Russian aggression jump-started the biggest military buildup since the 1930s. The ripple has spread worldwide. China's rise under Xi, aircraft carriers, hypersonics, destroyers, sent neighbors scrambling. India pumped $75 billion into defense. The Philippines, historically inward-looking, is throwing 35.
The Philippines have been getting into so many little skirmishes with the Chinese fleet out there in the South China Sea. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of hilarious. I love seeing the Philippines troll the Chinese fleet.
$5 billion at military modernization. Japan is sharpening its self-defense force into a real joint military with bite and is exploring a partnership with South Korea, once wartime enemies, to co-develop missile defense systems to counter China and North Korea. Political scientists call it the security dilemma. One nation rearms, rivals react, and costs spiral.
That's scary. So we're all spending for nothing, possibly, unless we do get to finally use this. However, it's kind of one of those things where since we have it, shouldn't we use it? And is that why we're seeing an escalation of conflict all around the world? It's like, okay, well, we spent all this money on this thing. Screw it. Let's go ahead and just see what happens. You know, It's like building the nukes. It's like, well, we just built, what are their names again? The Fat Man and Little Boy. We got to drop it on somebody. We got to study it. Sorry, Hiroshima. Sorry, Nagasaki. To be fair, I think there's more that goes into it, but I'm just saying.
China builds carriers, the US builds subs, Russia rattles nukes, Europe rearms. Everyone sees defense but feels offense. It's the world's most expensive game of chicken. Everyone is spending billions, but no one dares to blink. For NATO's smaller states, the 2% GDP pledge makes the most sense, yet for such small economies it can feel like a straitjacket. Estonia spends nearly 3% of its GDP on defense, despite having less economic firepower than Tulsa, Oklahoma. Latvia's 5%.
That's so crazy. Jeez, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Of GDP defense bill now tops its education, health, and infrastructure budgets combined. If proposals in Washington prevail, U.S. defense spending could explode to $1.7 trillion annually by 2034.
My goodness.
A peacetime figure nearly double the Cold War peak. Without a plan to pay for it, that increase would more than double the federal.
We could be killing our economies, all of us, and we might not even use it. Like, yeah, the way this is going, because we're escalating all around the world, and no one has the money for it. That's the concept. That's the theory of this video. That is a terrifying thought that I can honestly say. I mean, I know that my prediction is that conflict will ramp up. We will continue to see people fighting, more and more things like Israel versus everybody, and Russia versus Ukraine. I don't know if we'll see China versus Taiwan exactly, but I think we'll continue to see military actions all around the world. But this is an even scarier thought. Maybe we do see minor military action all around the world. We all keep spending more and more on defense, and we find ourselves in another Great Depression.
Federal fiscal gap, turning a fixable budget challenge into a full-blown economic time bomb. And nowhere is the cost of modern warfare clearer than in Ukraine. On March 15, 2023, a visiting American intelligence officer watched as Ukrainian artillery crews torch $50,000 in ammo every minute.
Yeah.
Each 155 millimeter.
I've seen those videos where they're firing some anti-aircraft or something, and it's just like $1 million, $1 million, $1 million. It's like, and you just see it flash before your eyes.
Shell costs $8,000. HIMARS rockets come in at $168,000 a shot. Guided Excalibur rounds are somewhere between $60,000 and $112,000 each. And that is just...
to be fair, I don't think we should stop, funding Ukraine. We definitely need to still fund it. And we just need to keep it in mind, like, war is expensive, and we need to end this war, and hopefully we don't have any other military action that has to take place. But yeah, we need to continue to fund Ukraine.
The surface. Russia's Zircon hypersonic missiles run over $5 million per unit. China's DF-17 glide vehicle probably cost billions to develop. The U.S. has spent billions trying to catch up with no fielded system yet. Even cheaper systems add up fast. Turkey's $5 million Bayraktar TB2 drones proved deadly, but jamming them costs billions. The U.S. Army's new AI-integrated air defense system is priced at $1.1 billion each, meaning a Patriot battalion would probably...
And we're going to have to revamp all this stuff anyways, because we're going to need to update it for AI. Once AI, like every 6 months, AI is getting better, apparently. So we're going to have to keep upgrading this stuff.
Cost $4 to $5 billion, and likely obsolete in 5 years. Cyber war flips the equation. Low-cost offense, sky-high defense. Estonia spends $50 million a year protecting its networks. The U.S. pours nearly $10 billion into Cyber Command, with billion-dollar contracts to Microsoft and Google for infrastructure that didn't even exist a decade ago. The real bottleneck is manufacturing. Ukraine has been given over 8,000 Javelin anti-tank systems, but the U.S. makes 2,400 annually. Semiconductor shortages are now delaying weapons production, and China controls a vast percentage of the rare earth minerals needed.
This is crazy seeing Xi Jinping in this animation for infographics. Very interesting, and I can see his face, though.
For advanced military tech, creating a choke point money can't quickly fix. History backs the warning. The Soviets spent 15 billion rubles in Afghanistan and collapsed.
Yeah.
Britain won World War II but limped out broke. At the height of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the United States was spending upwards of $12 billion a month. Forecasts of a Chinese invasion of
And there's the wrong map again, bro. The map behind it. You got to show the wrong map twice.
Taiwan have U.S. costs topping $1 trillion annually, or 6.7% of GDP, not counting the shock of...
I just don't even know how they made that mistake, bro. How did they make the mistake of including Vietnam? Man, Yeah, like I said, Vietnam does not like China. You probably pissed off that entire country with this one.
Global supply chain collapse. The security dilemma that once fueled superpower arms races now threatens the economic foundations of civilization itself. Every defensive measure appears offensive to rivals. Every weapon system demands countermeasures. Every alliance obligation triggers cascading spending that no treasury can sustain indefinitely. As military budgets soar while nations struggle under record debt burdens, the fundamental questions remain unanswered. Are they preparing for victory or mutual destruction? In their desperate race to prevent their own annihilation, have the world's powers instead guaranteed it? If tensions keep rising, the next big conflict is likely to erupt in the Pacific.
Yeah, that's what we're all waiting for, a conflict in the Pacific. This was actually a terrifying video, putting it from an economic standpoint and just like flashing the idea that like, what if we spend all this much and nothing even happens and this all goes to waste and we're just throwing money down the drain. That's crazy. I mean, I think you need to spend at least a little bit on defense. You need defense, but maybe it's starting to get out of control. I don't know. Let me know down below what you think. Big thanks to my patrons this month. If you want your name here, check that Patreon link in the description down below. Never change Drew unless you want to. We need a Drew bobblehead figurine. Petition for Drew
Alexander
to make
the Terrible,
ASMR
Connor
Tingles
Pavlik,
version 2.
Frederick Tiblin,
King Bear Hayes,
Lord Track,
Luxembourg Lover,
Miglu the Goat,
Nolan, Nord Tyrol,
Tambrin,
and William.